Arshile. Bartush, dearest, loving memories of our garden in Armenia's Khordom often haunt me. Recall Father's garden down the path from our house and the tree of the cross. Within our garden could be found the glorious and life-giving panoply of Armenian nature, so unknown to all and yet so in need of being known. In my art, I often draw our garden and recreate its precious greenery and life. Bartush, dear, the series of paintings I discussed concern our garden in our Armenia's Khordom. I named them Garden in Sachi, although truthfully, I should really title them Garden in Khordom, and I believe I will. The Americans, alas, are ignorant of Armenia, and I have learned that they prefer names of places more popularly known. I feel it is wrong, and I will attend to it. An important event took place in the life of Vostanika Doyan in 1942. Completing a painting he called Parkway Church, he signed it for the first time with the name of Gorky. His assumed name, Arshile Gorky, has been a matter of much controversy. The idea of a pseudonym had first emerged when the U.S. immigration officials, unable to correctly spell Armenian names, called them differently. Initially, Gorky had looked for something that sounded more Armenian. Prior to 1932, he had for some time appeared alternately as Archie Gann, Archie Colt, or Gorky. Beginning with 1932, he started signing his paintings as Arshile Gorky. Subsequently, in several interviews and exhibitions, he passed himself as a relation of Maxim Gorky, and was considered for some time to be the cousin of the Russian author. What made him do this? Having an exhibition in America was no easy feat, especially if one happened to be an immigrant. Whereas Arshile had a lot to do for his nation, something that is incontestable today. A poor artist did not have much alternative than to assume the name of the celebrated Russian author as a sort of a defensive guise. As it later appeared, this pseudonym was not chosen arbitrarily. He had wanted a name that would echo his life. The Russian word Gorky translates as bitter, whereas Arshile is of Armenian origin, derived from the name Arshak. The artist considered his life bitter, bitter Armenian. Gorky almost never told anyone of his hard past. He was even ashamed to admit that his mother had starved to death. He made it up as if a dog had bitten her. Gorky could never forgive himself for the death of his mother. He spent all his life painting the two portraits of artist and his mother, never taking them to completion. Perhaps he wanted to reawaken his mother through painting. Her apron, her eyes, photographed for the first time in her life, her hands, which remained forever like the dough that only she could make. She had once told him, kneading the dough, "Bostanik, the cheeks of your wife will have to be like this dough." Through the rest of his life, Arshile sought the softness of his mother's dough in the faces of his successive infatuations. Arshile Gorky was the embodiment of a kind and faithful person for his friends and relatives. He was endowed with an inexhaustible sense of humor and had a penchant for thinking up imaginative stories around his person, like the one on being Maxim Gorky's cousin, which Russian speakers tended to dismiss since Arshile did not speak Russian to begin with. Not to mention that Maxim Gorky's real name was Alexei Peshkov. This infinite imagination helped him paint things he had never seen before. like the earth and clouds seen from above, from a flying airplane, though he had never flown in an airplane before. He was commissioned to do that mural for the Newark airport, but it was subsequently painted over and stayed like that for decades as a sample of art that was then incomprehensible for the public at large. The modern-day public exerted a lot of effort to clean up the later paint and move the mural to the airport's museum. In 1926, Gorky moved to New York City for good, studying as well as teaching at various art schools and studios. In 1930, through an invitation by Alfred Barr, Arshile took part in an exhibition of artists under the age of 35 at the New York Museum of Modern Art. This brought him recognition in the art circles and contributed to the advancement of his career. But Arshile still lived in poverty. To be able to pay the rent, he often sold his paintings for $5, $10, or $20. When friends offered to help him with some money, Arshile gave them his paintings in return. He could not stand the indignity of borrowing. In 1934, Gorky's first personal exhibition took place in Philadelphia. He was finally accepted as a serious painter, still wondering where did all the emotions and ideas come from. The Armenian youth was still a mystery. Some critics claimed that Gorky was simply a copier of Picasso, a hanger-on of Cézanne, Ingres, and Miro. Harold Rosenberg stated that Gorky based his canvases on Cézanne, his reds on the colors of Russia and the Mediterranean. His stroke had Arabic and Iranian origins. The line was from Miro. The tragic themes were Byzantine and Russian. Another critic claimed that Gorky produced random paintings and was of no artistic value. To their eyes, bright Armenian colors were Arabic, Turkish, or Persian. Gorky was experiencing profound disillusionment. Vartush, dear, do you realize how the critics ramble, the mask that hides their vacuum? In that series I have, for example, depicted most prominently the beautiful Armenian slippers Father and I used to wear, the ones we purchased in Armenia's Van from the Armenian artists when Uncle Grigor and I rode there by horse. Remember? They insist on calling them Turkish or Persian slippers. Mother's Armenian eyes they call Picasso's. Armenian melancholy eyes they term Byzantine and Russian. And if I correct them and say, "No, dear sirs, you err, for these are Armenian eyes," they thereupon view one strangely and pronounce that such corrections are mere exaggerations of small nation chauvinism. Imagine the audacity. Our eyes. The eyes of the Armenian speak before the lips move and long after they cease to. A son of the world's first Christian country is asked if he's a Muslim. One would think Armenia never existed except for Noah's Ark on Ararat and our Tigris and Euphrates. Even our ancient forebears, who furnished so much to the origins of civilization and art, are virtually unknown here. For years on end, Gorky painted and repainted his canvases. They seemed to always be ready for change. And Arshile strived towards faultlessness by modifying them from time to time. For him, a completed painting was dead. He never completed his paintings, he simply put them on hold. Gorky also had a habit of burning his paintings every once in a while, or simply discarding them with trash. Those that were spared the fate were of great value for him. Thanks to Arshile's friends, who often salvaged trash canvases, quite a few of those have survived to our days. In 1941, Gorky was invited to the Grand Central School of Art as a professor of draftsmanship. He married Agnes Magruder in the same year. He called her Mugosh all his life. 2 daughters were born to this marriage, Moreau and Natasha. The birth of the children changed Gorky's life completely. They gave him a fresh breath. Having dreamt of it for years on end, Gorky finally decided to visit Armenia. But the onset of the Second World War in 1941 prevented him from fulfilling his dream. In the same year, an exhibition of Armenian painters was organized in support of the warring motherland. Arshile sent 4 paintings to Armenia, 2 for the elderly and orphaned, and 2 more for the benefit of victory. Gorky's clashes with the critics continued. In 1944, he meets with André Breton, a poet and artist who had emigrated from France. This meeting was pivotal for Gorky's life. André Breton was the first to appreciate Gorky's art. For me, Arshile Gorky is the only painter who has completely revealed the secret of this world. The key to this is his capacity to play freely with infinity, wrote Breton. Gorky's paintings are complex. He is on a quest for the infinite. When entering Gorky's world, one only sees the eruptions of incessant spirit. Gorky's world is a world charged with emotions. Abstract art helps us to fathom that which is beyond the readily visible, distinguish the endless from the circumscribed, unleashing the mind. Abstraction helps to see what the eye does not see. The human eye can easily reach out to the palpable, but the mind will stagnate once deprived of creative imagination. Gorky's art is just like that. It breaks through the limitations of time. It breaks through the limitations of line, entering the realm of the infinite, forging new forms of expression. Gorky's paintings are windows opening up to the brave new world, new skies, and new life. To look and imagine within oneself, about oneself, the rhythm, the sway, the proportion. The space in Gorky's paintings transform into quintessential expressions of an individual spirit that one cannot help but feel and live with. The people and nature of his native village culminate on his canvases in a definitive portrait of motherland. Color purple becomes the basic prerequisite of imagination in his art. Every object cherished in the memories of his childhood, whether an Armenian churn, a plow, slippers, his mother's apron, expands on his canvases into a carnival of colors. The portraits of his relatives and mother are like eloquent witnesses to an entire nation's tragedy. When painting, Gorky fully immersed in his work, and nothing could tear him away from the easel. He seemed to dissolve into the world he painted, like he did one day in January of 1946. This was the day when his Connecticut studio caught fire. He had felt the smoke, but ascribed it to a cigarette and went on working until the entire studio was on fire. Help was late. The only thing he salvaged was the photograph of himself with Mother, taken in 1912. This was yet another tragedy in Gorky's life. More than 40 paintings had perished in the fire. No count was taken. Maybe there were more paintings. Perhaps masterpieces? Misfortune was after Gorky. Once again, he experienced profound disillusionment. But he once again found the strength to paint even more brilliant works, saying, "Nothing is lost. The paintings are inside me." In February of 1946, Gorky was diagnosed with cancer and underwent demanding surgery. And although Arshile overcame the tumor, ill fate did not let go of him. On January 26, 1948, a car revved up on a New York street, which was destined to deliver another fatal blow. Gorky was returning home with his friend Julian Levy at the wheel. When a malfunction of the brakes resulted in a crash. Gorky broke his neck, and his right hand was paralyzed.